My message today is simply titled Pillars and Platforms. Pillars and Platforms. And you may be wondering, well, what does that actually mean? What is that all about? Well, I don't know about you, but I've noticed in society, in culture today, that everyone seems to be going after a platform. That these days, again, culture has moved towards this because of technology and all that is available to us through our phones and the like. Everybody seems to be moving towards having some form of voice, a digital platform, where you can speak what you believe the world needs to hear. So you can be on Twitter or X, as it's now known. I'm not sure if anyone's on that anymore, but anyway, you can be on that. You can be on the gram, Instagram, and tell everyone what your meal was that you had and how great it was. You can be a YouTuber. You can be a YouTuber and video everything, and it's all wonderful. You can be a TikToker, guys. You can be any TikTokers in the room. You can be a TikToker these days. In fact, when I was growing up, I went to school and they would have career advisors where you'd go and sit down with the career advisor and they'd tell you what you should do. Literally, I think in my era, the career advisor for all the guys just had two options, accountant or engineer. And depending which, if the last guy was going to be an accountant, you walked in, they said engineer, off you go. And so you just had, now you can be a social media influencer. Like that was never an option when I was growing up. You know what that means now? That means you can go on vacation to like resorts, take photos, and they pay you to do this. Or you get to go free. I'm like, that was not engineer or accountant? No way. Social media influencer and get paid to go on vacation. Who would like that career? I'm like, thank you, I'll take that one. It was never an option when I was growing up, and yet the world has changed, and we now live in a day where you can create your own platform and have your own voice. The question I like to ask is, well, what does the Bible say about this? Just because culture is pushing us in a certain direction, is that the focus that we should give all our attention to? Now, I'm not saying that social media is wrong or bad. I think we'd all agree there are differing degrees of whether it is positive or negative. I'm not getting into that debate, but I am asking the question, when I go back to the Bible, is that the way God wants us to live? That we're all going after our own platform and we're all wanting to speak our voice. Maybe God has other things that should be our focus. And so we're going to have a look at that this morning. And I want us to begin in Psalm 1. Psalm 1, not someone. Psalm 1. In Psalm 1, we read about a blessed life, a blessed man. It describes in someone who is blessed of God. And in verse 3, it describes what that blessed life looks like. Someone who's blessed, you could use the term successful if that is language that maybe is helpful for you to understand. Someone whose life is moving forward in a positive way. And here's how it describes that person in verse 3. It says, they are like trees planted along the riverbank, bearing fruit each season. Their leaves never wither, and they prosper in all they do. What a beautiful image that is. I'm like, God help me to have that kind of life, that I would live like that. It talks about a tree planted, growing tall, bearing fruit, prosperous in all it does. Now, I've got an image of a tree going to come up on the screen. I love trees. I don't know about you. I don't know if you love trees, but I notice trees. That tree, we took that picture this morning just outside Virginia Beach. It's a beautiful tree, isn't it? My wife will tell you that if we go for walks and I see a beautiful tree, I'll stop and I'll go, that is a beautiful tree. And she'll go, you're weird. And I'm like, I know, and you know that because we've been married for 30 years. But I love trees. I think because trees remind me of the life God has called us to. You look at a beautiful tree like that and you consider that didn't just happen overnight, did it? At some point there was a seed in the ground. It became a sapling, and over time, through all different seasons, probably some immense heat, some drought, some rainy seasons, cold weather, all different kinds of seasons and experiences, the tree has continued to grow. Bear fruit, it looks beautiful, it provides shade, it provides somewhere for birds to live. It has immense benefit to the world around it. It is a blessing to its community, if you will. And that to me is an image of how God sees us, sees our lives growing up into this beautiful trees. Our church is growing up, our church here growing up into this beautiful tree that is a blessing to those around us. Now, if we move over into the New Testament, let's again look at the Word of God and see how it describes those who are following after God. So in Psalm 1, we see that God describes those who are blessed of Him, who are following after Him, as these beautiful trees. Well, in 1 Peter 2, verse 5, it talks about those who are following after God. You are living stones that God is building into His spiritual temple. What's more, you are His holy priests. So first we see an image of a beautiful tree, now describing you and I who are following after God as stones, as something solid and secure that is being used to build God's house, God's temple. So our lives are designed to have a root system that goes down, that grows up. Our lives are designed to be strong and secure and be there in place to hold and be part of holding together what God is building. And now let's go right to the end of the Bible. We're going to have a look at Revelation chapter 3 and verse 12. And what does it say about God, the followers of God? All who are victorious will become pillars in the temple of my God, and they will never have to leave it. And I will write on them the name of my God, and they will be citizens in the city of my God, the new Jerusalem that comes down from heaven from my God, and I will also write on them my new name. God here, through His Word, speaks to His people and says, well, if you are a blessed person, someone following after me, your life is like this tree. The roots are going down deep. You're building something strong. You're like a stone that's solid, that's secure, that's part of what I'm building. You are like a pillar. And see, as I started to consider this and look into this, I realized there's a connection here that God is, I believe, in this season where culture is pushing us in one direction, God is reminding us that He wants pillars growing up in His church more than those who are chasing after platforms. See, what I've realized is that pillars hold things up. They're about others. Platforms hold you up. It's all about you. Now, I'm on a platform today. So let me just remind you, I'm not saying all platforms are bad. And I'm going to use, hopefully, the time I have with you to the best of my ability on this platform. But God is reminding all of us, you can be seeking after a platform, but I want you to learn to be a pillar. And what does it mean to be a pillar in God's house, a pillar in society even? What does that look like? Well, it fascinates me that the first miracle Jesus ever did was one I would describe as a pillar miracle and not a platform miracle. And we'll look into this right now because Jesus isn't desiring to get up and publicly announce who he is. It's the miracle when Jesus turns water into wine at a young couple's wedding. So let's have a read of this together. We're going to turn to John chapter 2 and verse 1. It says, the next day there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mother told him there's no more wine. Jesus' mother appears to be one of those mamas that gets involved. She's seen the problem. She's aware that this young couple, it's their special day. They're wanting to celebrate. They've done their very best and they've run out of wine. This is embarrassing. This is shameful. This is humiliating. But Jesus' mother hears about what's going on and she knows someone who can change things, and it's her son, so she's going to get him involved. So Mama shows up, says, Jesus, they've run out of wine. Verse 4, we see Jesus' response. Dear woman, that's not our problem. Jesus replied, my time has not yet come. Now, can I just speak to the young people for a moment? You read the Bible and some of you, you're like, great. I love what this says. Let me tell you this. If your mama comes up to you and says, clean your room, put away what you got out, sort things out, whatever it might be. When your mother comes up and asks you to do something, do not quote Jesus. You will be quoting him way out of context. Do not say to your mother, dear woman, that's not our problem. Do not say to her, my time has not yet come. She will reply to you, yes, it has. And you're about to go and meet Jesus right now if you don't do what I say. Here's what I love about Jesus' mother. She totally ignores Jesus. Like she totally ignores. He goes, no, my time's not yet come. Mother, this isn't right. That's not my problem. She totally ignores him and keeps going on. Look at verse 5. She says, but his mother told the servants, do whatever he tells you. He said, it's not time, it's not right. Just ignore him. Just whatever he says, you just do it. Okay, ma'am. Standing nearby were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told the servants, fill the jars with water. When the jars had been filled, he said, now dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies. So the servants followed his instructions. When the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, look at this, not knowing where it had come from. Not knowing where it had come from. No one knew Jesus was involved. Though, of course, the servants knew. We know now because we get the hindsight of reading the Gospels, but at that time, no one knew Jesus was involved. He called the bridegroom over. A host always serves the best wine first, he said. Then everyone has had a lot to drink. He brings out the less expensive wine, but you've kept the best until now. This is unheard of. No one does this. You don't have the best wine at the end. Everything has changed. And this young couple have gone from being humiliated and embarrassed and shamed and the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons because Jesus gets involved. Now here's the thing. When Jesus gets involved, he wasn't getting involved and going, maybe he was at the party or at the wedding and he's just reclining with his disciples, just kind of eating a little bit of hummus and dip. It's contextually correct. And just enjoying his time. His mother comes over and says, you better get involved. They've run out of wine. And Jesus is like, that's not my problem. I'm not doing that. But here's the thing. Jesus doesn't make a big announcement about it. Jesus does not get up on a platform, so to speak, and go, never fear, JC is here. Nobody knows. He just tells the servants, fill those jars with water and then take some and pour into a glass, into the cup, and it becomes wine. Why does Jesus do this miracle? He doesn't do it so that the world will see who he is. He doesn't do it to prove himself on a platform. He does it because a young couple are going to feel shame and humiliation, and he will not allow that to happen. So he does a pillar miracle where he is simply serving a young couple in the background so their day can be special, so they can experience what we refer to today as the grace of God. They didn't earn it or deserve it, and yet Jesus gave it to them in the form of wine that they never had the capacity to do or experience or give or create for themselves. Jesus does a pillar miracle. He's in the background. He is simply there to serve this young couple. Can you imagine the bridegroom? I mean, the bridegroom, when he hears, obviously they're out of wine, he's like, oh no. Like the poor guy, you know, it's his special day. He wants his beautiful bride to be celebrated. You know, in those days, I mean, it's the talk of the town when you put the wedding on. Everyone knows about it. And he's thinking, we've run out of wine. It is embarrassing. Everyone, and now they're going to remember our wedding for all the wrong reasons. And then the master of ceremonies comes up to him and says, oh my goodness, I can't believe you've done this. I cannot believe it. This wine is the best wine. You've saved it till last. I can't believe you did that. And the bridegroom's just going, yeah. He doesn't know anything about it. Maybe he looks over Jesus and Jesus just kind of gives him a little knowing nod. No worries. And Jesus' mother said, I knew he'd sort it out. I knew it. That's just what he does. Jesus isn't trying to prove something to the world with this miracle. He is simply serving a couple in their time of need. See, that's what pillars do. Pillars aren't about the platform. Pillars don't need to be celebrated. Pillars are happy to allow others to be celebrated while they just hold up what needs to be held up. See, it's interesting to me that Jesus constantly had battles with one group of people. You can read about it in the Bible. That group was referred to as the Pharisees. They were the religious leaders of the day. Why did Jesus battle with them? Because they had a platform and they used it in the wrong way. That they had a platform and they used it for themselves, and they manipulated others because they had a platform rather than using it the way Jesus knew it was to be intended to be used, and that was to serve. And so again, you got to be so careful when you're on a platform. You got to be so careful when you seek after a platform, because the only purpose you have for being on a platform is to serve. And the reason God's looking for pillars is because they understand that principle. And Jesus continued to teach his disciples that they had to change their mindset from one of the world and the culture that is always trying to put ourselves first and say, no, take a step back and serve others, because that is what we're all about. That is what it means to represent Jesus, and to follow after him is not always to be in the front, but sometimes to be in the back and just hold up what needs to be held up and serve faithfully. And Jesus said it like this in Matthew 20, verse 25. But Jesus called them all together and said, you know the rulers of this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. He's constantly reminding them, hey, there's a culture that's trying to pull you in one direction. Let me remind you. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. For even the Son of Man, he's referring to himself, came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus was constantly teaching them, constantly reminding them, hey, you aren't here to build your platform. You're here to learn to be a pillar and to serve others. It's maybe a term that is an old school term, but I believe we need to bring it back. That we need more pillars, people who stand strong in God's house. There was a term, a pillar in a community. I think we need more people who are pillars in their communities, who are there to serve their community. I'm not here to get out of it what I can. I'm here to give into it what I can. That I'm here to serve the community around me. I believe as men and women of faith that should be our priority. How can we serve our community? I love that you guys are committed and sowing into a church that is making a difference in Israel. I mean, that is serving people who are being pillars in a place that needs it desperately right now. We have a church in Tel Aviv, and we have a beautiful young couple who've taken on leading that church. And God is using them in miraculous ways in the midst of a very difficult and challenging situation. And they say, we are there to be Jesus to serve the people. We want them to see Jesus not just through what we preach, but how we serve them in this season and in this time. And that's so often how people see Jesus, isn't it? Not just our words, not just coming to church and hearing a message, but how we live as pillars in our community, in our families, in the society around us. And I know this church is filled with people who are pillars. I've been driven this week around by Ben. And Ben is a great man. And Ben's telling me he's been in this church 30 years. I mean, that is a pillar right there. So, and well done. Can we just honor men like Ben? Because a church is built on people who stick around. So it's not, there's no perfect church anywhere, but I'm staying because the roots are going down deep and I want to serve. How can I serve? How can I be of blessing to others? And as you do that, build over time, God does something in your life. I've been in our church since I was a teenager, as Pastor Steve said. I met my wife there in youth group. We've grown up and just part of our church. And we're committed to building the church that God has called us, not from the position of, well, we've got a platform, but the position of how do we continue to be a pillar, lift and serve the lives of others. So a couple of thoughts about pillars and platforms. Number one, pillars are comfortable with silence. Platforms must say something. Pillars are comfortable with silence. Platforms must say something. When you've got a platform, you feel like, I better say something. Even if you don't have anything to say, you feel like you better say something. Matthew 27 verse 12. Again, fascinating. Jesus didn't always respond. He's brought before the leaders and he's going to go to the cross and be crucified. And here they are accusing him, the priests and the elders. Matthew 27 verse 12. But when the leading priests and elders made their accusations against him, Jesus remained silent. He could have responded. Don't you hear all these charges they're bringing against you? Pilate demanded, but Jesus made no response to any of the charges, much to the governor's surprise. At that time, Jesus was like, I don't need to respond. There is a bigger purpose that I'm about, and so I'm going to stay silent here right now. Some of us need to learn this principle. There's a saying, it's not in the Bible, but I found it to be quite true. Never wrestle with a pig, because the pig loves it, and you get mud all over you. It's not biblical, but I find it to be truthful. Because there are times where you engage in arguments and the like on platforms and social media, and no one wins. Sometimes it's better just to say, I know my purpose, I know what I'm called to. I'm not going to get down into this mud. I'm going to stay above it, and I'm going to trust God that He'll speak on my behalf when needed, and I'm just going to keep serving faithfully God and the people around me, and He'll speak through me or through someone else when needed. And that's exactly what Jesus did at that time of accusation, because He knew there was a deeper, greater purpose, and He wasn't going to stoop to that level. Number two, pillars have built their own strength. Platforms rely on the strength of others. Pillars build their own strength because they're holding things up. When you're on a platform, someone else has built that. You're relying on someone else's strength. This is not a platform that I've built. I'm honored to be on this platform, but Steve and Sharon and the team have built this platform, and others who serve faithfully in this church over many years. I didn't build it. I'm grateful to be on this platform, but pillars build their own strength. Some of us are using platforms. We've never built our own strength. And that's why when something comes against you, you freak out, you get overwhelmed, you can't believe that someone would say that, because you've not built your own strength and resilience. You just got a platform and you think that's giving you strength. No, it's not. It's the difference between having strength and having a voice. Number three, pillars last the test of time and endure seasons. Platforms come and go. I mean, they do, don't they? You see it in life. You see it politically. There are times when someone's in government and they have a platform, and then that time goes. There are jobs where you have a platform for a time and then you won't. I'm in this role, but I'm not in this role forever. At some point, I'll hand it on to somebody else. I'm grateful for the opportunity I have to lead and hopefully serve our church and take things forward in a positive way. But at some point, this platform will go. If you're insecure, you need the platform to sustain your feeling of value and identity. And that will never, that's a recipe for disaster, my friend. Grateful for the platform, but it's not who you are. You see it with people in the celebrity world. They have a platform for a season, then they don't. It comes and it goes. Platforms come and go. You cannot build your life on and from the platform. You have to build it from a deeper place. Pillars last test of time. They go through seasons. They endure seasons like a beautiful tree, and they keep staying strong. Number four, pillars built over time create platforms of credibility and wisdom. So when you build strength in your life over time, guess what? You start to get a platform. A platform where people will listen to your voice. I'll listen to Pastor Paul because for 40 years, he has built the church. I'll listen to him about life. He and Marie, I'll listen to them about marriage, about raising kids. Why? Because over time, they've built a life. I'll listen to Pastor Steve and Sharon as well over time because they've built a life. It's not just a platform, it's over time. They've built something that has given them credibility and wisdom to stand and be on certain platforms and have something to say. Now, I just want to encourage all the young people here. I want to say, hey, if you get a platform, ask God for wisdom with it, but you need to become a pillar. And that takes time. I feel like more and more in society today, we're looking for shortcuts. You know, we want to shortcut the pillar process and get straight to the platform. And God's saying, no, just build strength. Build it over time. And guess what? When you have the platform, you will have something good to say. Which leads me to my final thought here, number 5. Pillars are committed to what they're becoming. Platforms focus on what they're saying. When you're a pillar, you're like, who am I becoming in this process? Jesus said this statement. I've been reflecting on it recently. He said, what would it do for a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? If you gain the whole world, you gain everything, but you lose the essence of who you are. You can have a whole lot of stuff, but are you comfortable in who you've become in the process. The man or woman you've become. That you are serving faithfully and aligned in all areas of your life. Not perfect, but just aligned, moving forward. Because you're not trying to gain the whole world at the expense of who you're becoming. Pillars are more committed to what they're becoming. Platforms just focus on, I better have something to say, I better have something to say, I better have something to say. See, I wrote this in my notes. The best of what I say always comes out of who I am. The best of what I say always comes out of who I am. I can quote other people. I can download things now. You have Chat GPT. My goodness. Never had that. Chat GPT can craft a whole message for you. But it won't come out of who you are. It may be helpful. I'm not saying don't use it, but I'm saying you better have something out of who you are to say. Because that's what will resonate and connect with the hearts of people. You know, as we conclude, I want to talk about a man who was a pillar in our church. An image of him is going to come up on the screen. And his name is Pastor Serge. Pastor Serge Gregoric. You may have never met Pastor Serge, but I think anyone who ever came to our Hillsong Church in Sydney at our Hills campus would have met him, because he stood on the front doors and he greeted everybody. And he smiled and he hugged and he made you feel welcome. You may have walked in alone and he was going to give you a big smile and say, you know what, it's so good you're here. He served faithfully for 30 plus years in our church. He started off with his wife Narelle in the kids ministry, helping there. He ended up as part of our pastoral care team. And sadly, at the start of this year, Pastor Serge passed away. Went to be with Jesus, promoted to heaven. And I started receiving stories about Pastor Serge. People would say things like, man, when my child was sick and ended up in hospital, the first person there was Pastor Serge. When we lost a loved one and we were grieving, the first person to our house and to be with our family was Pastor Serge. When I arrived at church and I felt completely alone and I didn't feel like I belonged, Pastor Serge greeted me and gave me a hug and invited me in and made me feel welcome. People told story after story of how Pastor Serge had just served them faithfully, showed love, showed kindness, showed gentleness, showed grace, showed all of those things. You know, the thing about Pastor Serge is he very rarely, if ever, got up on a platform. I don't know if he ever preached in our church. He never got onto we had big Hillsong conference. He never got onto the platform at Hillsong conference. I don't think it ever bothered him, because I think he knew exactly where God needed him to be. As a pillar, serving people. And so at his memorial service, a guy who was never on a platform, we had to hold it in our convention center, our Hillsong Convention Center that seats thousands, for a guy who was never on a platform, because he served faithfully as a pillar. And at that memorial service, thousands of people got to hear via a platform about the life of beautiful Pastor Serge. The way he loved Jesus, the way he loved and served his family, the way he loved and served his church family. This is a man who made a decision. I'm going to be a pillar. I'm going to be a pillar in God's house. I'm going to be a pillar for people, and I'm going to serve them faithfully. And out of that became a man who ended up with a platform that even at his memorial service, thousands were there and hearing all about Jesus, because this man chose to serve. Come on, he chose to serve as a pillar in the house of God. And I believe God is stirring us again in a culture that is pushing us toward platforms and voices, and I got to have my say. I believe God is reminding us, hey, you might get your say, but what matters more is how will you serve? How will you serve others? Because platforms will come and go, but you can be a pillar in God's house. Every one of us can be a pillar in the house of God simply by saying, I'm here and I'm grateful to be here. How can I serve others? How can I serve others in my community? Serving others who may not even come to the church, serving our neighbors, being those people, because I believe that is who Jesus is desiring and calling us to be more than ever in the culture and society we're living in that becomes more and more divided. Whether people believe the same thing as us or not, we are going to serve them with the love of Jesus. Because that is who He, I believe, is calling us to be. In a world that's pursuing platforms, let's choose to be pillars. Strong, secure, bringing wisdom, strength, and hope to those around us. Because we're committed to being planted in God's house. Would you stand with me?